We celebrate the Elons, the Jobs, the Gates, the Bezos of the world. And what is common amongst all of them, right? They put that mantra to work to create amazing companies. I mean, world changing, once in a generation, Fortune 500 entities. At what cost? They've had multiple marriages. They don't have quality relationships with their children, right? And do not get me wrong. If we're going to move the needle societally, people like that need to exist.
Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zach Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today's guest is a man on a mission to help high performers unlock the fittest version of their leadership. Mycal Anders is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, best-selling author, and founder of Next Level Performance Consulting, where he's coached over 4,000 men and women since 2011. With advanced degrees in fitness and global management, Mycal blends physical performance, mindset mastery, and organizational leadership to help executives create alignment in their health, habits, and high-stakes decisions. His vision? A world where leaders don't burn out chasing success, but rise up as the strongest, most fulfilled versions of themselves. Mycal, welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast, my friend.
Zach, thank you so much for having me, brother. It's an honor.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm super excited to have you here. Mycal, I always like to start with this question because I think it reveals a lot about who someone really is. What does growth mean to you right now in this season of your life and business?
Growth to me means seeking intentional adversity, putting yourself in a position to play at your edges and find out who you really are. And, we talk about this a lot, as athletes and veterans and in the entrepreneur circles, and you've even mentioned it, if you're not growing, you're dying. If it's not growing, it's dying. And, just without breaking the system over and over and over again, stressing it enough, much in the same way that we pursue our physical practice, stressing it enough that it becomes more resilient. And that comes in a lot of different ways. For example, we are in the process of sunsetting our training facility here in Scottsdale because it's served its purpose. It did what it was supposed to do for the last 12 years that we did it. And now, as I'm being called to evolve, my team is being called to evolve, the practice of Next Level is being called to evolve. And to not heed that would just be a slow death that, where this thing that propelled and created momentum becomes an obstacle and an anchor. And if you're really in tune with your alignment, it makes a very challenging decision. And I'll be the first to admit I've been an emotional train wreck moving through this decision, this season of my life. And at the same time, because it's in alignment, I've received nothing but overwhelming support from those whose best interest, their best self-interest is negatively impacted by this decision. So that's one of the things, if you're ever in question as to whether or not, the stress you're putting on a system or yourself is in alignment with what's next and highest for you, look at the clues that the universe has given you. So I hope that's a really long-winded answer to that question, but that's what growth is to me.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that resonates with me on multiple levels, Mycal, because, I can relate, for me, one of our parallels is our past lives, right? I mean, I had 17 years in the health and wellness industry, boutique training studios, especially retail store. And I remember going through a similar transition where it was like 17 years building this thing that I thought I wanted to build an empire around, only to realize that one, I had a glass ceiling, which was going to limit my growth. We had geographic limitations with suppliers and not to mention the fact that while I love the fitness industry, I love health and wellness, I love the empowerment, the lessons, I mean, everything that comes through the discipline of building the best version of ourselves physically, um, I also had fallen in love with business more and the process of
Mhm.
building and felt like I could have even more impact. And I was starting to feel that fulfillment that I originally had from helping people achieve their next level of health start to wane, where I'm like, there's more, I'm capable of more, and I can have a greater impact that's even more transcendent. And it sounds like you're going through a lot of those same things. And I'm curious, from your perspective, for
Yeah.
other entrepreneurs that are potentially going through a transition like this, you know, I love your vulnerability. Like you talked about, it hasn't been easy,
Yeah.
and it's been an emotional roller coaster. If you wouldn't mind, like talk a little bit more about that journey and what it's been like for you, and maybe what are some of the challenges, the conversations you've had to have with
Yeah.
yourself. Like, what's it been like,
Yeah. Well, first of all, you got to make sure and this has been my experience and had a lot of utility for me. So this is 100% anecdotal, and also it's me putting into practice a lot of what I've helped move my clients through over the years as well. One of my mentors actually put it beautifully as I started to execute on this decision, which gave me a lot of solace. He's like, Mycal, one of my deepest fears as a leader and as a consultant and as a husband in all facets of his life is to be seen as a hypocrite, to not do or uphold the standard that I hold myself, my wife, my clients, my friends, my circles of influence, to not have that standard or higher for myself, and and yet still have that expectation of others. There is no greater fear than to become a hypocrite of your own practice. So there's 100% a layer of that is extremely motivating.
Yeah.
And also, uh I told my wife, and we're in business together, when while we had time on our side and things were good, because there's nothing about this practice that, by the numbers from the outside looking in would suggest like, oh yeah, it's time to offload it, right? So, we at the same time we're leasing a space, and the property owner, we've reached an impasse in negotiation. So with time on our side, and while things are good, I told Nicole, I need you to hold me accountable to this decision, and come hell or high water, we will not be in this location at the end of the lease. Whether we have a new place or not, we will not be here, because it's also been demonstrated over and over and over in my life's journey and what the work that we do in consulting with our clients, that to hold on 24 hours longer, let alone renew an additional 12 months, 2 years, whatever whatever greatness lies on the other side goes away. That
Mhm.
opportunity, whatever it is, goes on to somebody else who shot their shot, who honored their commitment, who stayed true to their alignment. So whatever that is for us, for me, goes away and on to the next person who's willing and ready to receive it, if I don't honor that alignment. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah,
So
completely.
and if that's like too woo woo, too
Mhm.
esoteric
Mhm.
for you, you also need to acknowledge. And I actually just led a workshop for a mastermind this past weekend. In that, when you're trying to identify what's an alignment for you now, because this is a very evolutionary process, a great exercise to move through is, what is the 20% of what I do that creates 80% of my desired results? Chances are what lies in that 20% is where you find flow, where you find joy, where you find ease. Okay. It doesn't matter what your technical acumen is, it doesn't matter what your education is, it doesn't matter what your experience is with a thing. Chances are if you really sit down and you understand what the 20% is, and you begin to make the shifts in your life in a professional sense, uh, adding the infrastructure to your organization, making those key hires, or just simply eliminating the shit that falls outside of that 20% by through delegation or elimination, you'll create more momentum for yourself. And
Hmm.
I was sitting there thinking to myself, Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule, what's it? I've never seen a visual representation of it, you know?
Mm.
And all I could think of, and my drawing was shit, but it landed and I was really happy that it did. Where these concentric circles, in that, uh, you have a big circle that represents the 80% of what it takes to get things done. And then there's the 20% that lies in your genius. And it's like a Pac-Man type graphic, right? And then as you evolve, your 20% becomes the 80%, and you're continuing to optimize and refine, optimize and refine,
Mm.
optimize and refine. And when you find yourself in a position where you can no longer outsource it, delegate it, eliminate it, or whatever, it makes a lot of the more challenging decisions, like sunsetting your practice, that much more obvious because it's all that's left to dial into that new 20%, that evolved 20%. And, where you would otherwise hang on for too long or try to, put the holes in a sinking ship, fill them with band-aids because you ain't got no more concrete left. Your bandwidth, your capacity, all that, your know-how. It makes a lot of those really tough decisions so much easier to reconcile for yourself, even though they're still challenging. I've had over the last month or so many what I like to call red light tears where I get to the stoplight, the light turns red, and I'm just sitting in traffic and just weeping over like, oh, this old, outdated version of Mycal has to die in order for this newer, better version of me, of next level, to evolve and thrive. And even though it's necessary, even though it's justified, even though you've done all the mental masturbation around making it okay, that doesn't make it any less emotional, at least not in my experience. And like it's
Yeah.
okay to, for anybody that's listening and moving through this currently or has done it in the past and like holds it against themselves, or what a blubbering baby you became at certain points along the way, or and if you haven't, you will. Like, it's okay. Be present for that experience. Let the grieving. This was really interesting to me. A beautiful soul in my circle of influence. She's a somatic practitioner, and she was like, Mycal, it's okay for you to grieve.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you're letting go. You're saying goodbye. You're evolving. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to want to have done more. Like all of those things are okay, but to stifle them, to which is such a practice of our generation, to just stuff it down on behalf of your masculine, and not let that vulnerability come to the surface and percolate for a little bit. It only does you a disservice, and you're
Yeah.
all the good juju, all that positive momentum that you want to take into this next experience is tainted because you haven't completely let go of the old, and you're trying to take as much
Mm.
of that shit with you as well, and it only inhibits the momentum that you're trying to walk into this new experience with.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the devil we know versus the ones we don't. And the thing that's
Yeah,
unknown
dude.
is always the scariest, but that's next level fulfillment, right? And I love what you were just saying too about vulnerability. And I think this is so important. And I love it coming from a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who's been conditioned to be the fucking rock, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you're built like one too to begin with. So I mean, it's even better.
Thank you.
You know,
I
but
received
but
that.
truth though, yeah, I mean, but like the reality is, and particularly as men in the masculine, and frankly, we see it with women too. And people, we've been conditioned to bury our emotions. And the
Hmm.
problem is when you bury them, you know, emotions are there for a reason. You know, they're
Absolutely.
there as a signal
Hmm.
that that something is off or imbalanced or going in
Yes.
the right direction or going in the
Hmm.
wrong direction. And
Right.
the main point is if we don't take the time to step back and allow ourselves to feel
Hmm.
what we are feeling and
Yeah.
acknowledge it and
Yes.
label it,
Yes.
then we're going to continue to carry it, whereas it's supposed to flow through you. So
Correct.
vulnerability is a superpower. I mean, it's one of the
Mm.
critical ingredients to reaching your next level.
Yeah.
And you know, there's one thing I'm really curious about your perspective on. You know, when you in your executive coaching,
Yeah.
you're talking about the 20%, and immediately
Hmm.
what came to my mind is like zone of excellence and
Hmm.
zone of genius,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And a lot of people, like I know this in the past was a really big challenge for me. And I mean, it still can be at times. Like I've got to take
Hmm.
that step back and look at a high level. But like, how do you help people determine what that 20% is? Because there's a lot of
Hmm.
things people where it gets tricky is when you're really good at a lot of things and you're
Yeah.
like, but is it really my zone of genius? So how
Right.
could you help the audience like differentiate those things and maybe start processing
Mm.
like what might be some of the conversations you take them through, or what would you recommend?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's really important right here to really define what it is to be a quality leader in next level speak. Because to your point, as a Marine Corps veteran, you would expect quite the opposite of what I'm delivering right here, right now, right? Because our lens of leadership, much in the way that it's taught and celebrated, is born of a an ethos that is very outdated, very World War II. Our boys are coming home and now they are assimilating back into the world and they are going from combat leaders to business leaders. And that mantra of has evolved into what we know now as hustle culture, where we celebrate sleeping on the couch in your business, the 80, 120-hour work week to get shit done, the late night, the sleepless nights, hand jamming away at the keyboard, all of those things. And it's born of, you know, the processes like in the Marine Corps, mission, Marines, then me. And we've lost sight of the purpose that that actually serves, in that it has extremely high utility in a combat environment where the bullets are flying, the bombs are falling, and decisions need to get made right here, right now, at the speed of life and death. Right? That dynamic, it does not exist out here in the civilian world. Do we need to make competent decisions? Do we need to be decisive as leaders? Yes. Do we need to take action? Yes. Do so from a practical application standpoint, the result of that thought process is still required. However, where it keeps your ass alive in a life or death situation, it creates liabilities over the long term should it persist. That's where things like PTSD are born because, to your point, when you don't process those emotions, in the most extreme example, surviving a combat encounter and holding your best friend as he takes his last breath. Oh, and we got to move on to the next objective. You don't have time, and
Yeah.
rightfully so, to mourn, to grieve, to process, to do all of those things. Because if you don't want to be that guy, you need to
Mhm.
keep it fucking moving, right?
Mhm.
Pardon my French. Now, those are the same attributes that we celebrate in business leaders. And millions of case studies have been done on this shit. We celebrate the Elons, the Jobs, the Gates, the Bezos of the world. And what is common amongst all of them, right? They put that mantra to work to create amazing companies. I mean, world changing, once in a generation, Fortune 500 entities. At what cost? They've had multiple marriages. They don't have quality relationships with their children, right? And do not get me wrong. If we're going to move the needle societally, people like that need to exist.
Yeah. Hmm.
And still, you need to recognize the outliers for what they are
Yeah.
and take the best of them and feel how and figure out how to integrate those attributes downstream so that you're no longer making yourself a liability through the application of those attributes, but making yourself a priority with them,
Yeah.
because the gift that those same individuals possess and execute at the highest level is making themselves a priority. Bill Gates takes weeks at a time to unplug and remove himself and just consume and learn and recalibrate, you know, uh, they in their own way, that dynamic, that white space is very intentionally programmed into their schedule, right?
Mhm.
And but that's not what we're taught. It's like
No.
if you're going to build it, right? You just be prepared to be a slave to the machine for as long as it takes for the greatness to show up. And at the same time, going back to this whole 80/20 application, if we really take the time to sit still for long enough to identify what that 20% is, then we get to make a decision as to how we're going to build our existence and insulate that 20%
Interesting.
and really come into that zone of genius. And if that means that we need to operate, in the 80 for a little while to get there, cool, but at least you understand that it's a means to an end. It's not in perpetuity where we just end up settling for mediocrity as so many of us do over and over and over again in our lifetimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. I mean, what connects with me on that? I mean, there's multiple things that connect with me on that, Michael. But I just had an epiphany as you were talking. It was like, I think one thing is, particularly if you've started your business from the ground up,
Mm-hmm.
is if we aren't shifting the mindset, because there's a different type of leadership that is required in a startup
Mm-hmm.
versus a company that's in a growth stage versus a scaling stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're not willing and disciplined enough to practice discernment so we can determine, am I moving beyond this current stage of business? Are the practices that got me here, we know well, are not going to serve us at our next level? Am I taking the appropriate steps to prepare and start making that transition?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a powerful insight, because if we don't, and we try to keep beating our head against the wall, recreating or reliving the same practices that brought us to our current level, then we're just living the definition of insanity. So that
Yeah.
makes sense on countless different levels. And also the taking the time to take a step back, which we're
Mm-hmm.
not conditioned to do. It's go do more, build more, become more, create more, sell more, serve
Yeah.
more, and but what about you? And if you're not taking time to focus on
Mm-hmm.
you, then you're never going to create the space to have the clarity that you need
Yeah.
to really allow yourself or your business to evolve. And that also, like what you said about sacrifice. I
Yeah.
mean, building a business requires sacrifice. And in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, you are going to wear all the hats.
Mm-hmm.
You're the solopreneur. And
Yep.
then you start offloading the tasks that you either identify as the ones you don't enjoy or that you're just not good at to
Mm-hmm.
people that will be really effective in those lanes.
Yeah.
And those are all really brilliant marks of leadership and awareness. And I love the example you talk about too with being in the military and
Yeah.
holding a dying brother. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
a really, really powerful way to illustrate those principles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm curious. So who, like, is there a particular, who's your goal client? Like if you could work with anybody in the world, who do you
Yeah.
really want to work with? And kind of what's the inception point? What's the problems that they're dealing with? Like, why do they want to come work with Mycal?
Yeah. Great question, man. Yeah. I I don't position myself this way, but a great friend of mine was, we're sitting there, she's also a coach, and we're comparing notes on our respective practices. And she's like, "Oh, so you just make sure that these people execute on their next easiest step. You're the alignment coach." And it's the coaching that I didn't have as I was coming up in business, in that I tried to ignore my flow, because and tried to force myself into uh, uh, liking admin and spreadsheets and all of that shit that I absolutely, it makes my skin crawl, takes me forever to do, and because my flow, I felt like from the outside looking in, looked like I was fucking off. Because when I'm in my genius, I'm face to face, knee to knee, doing the people thing, right? Making sure my clients are happy. I'm educating and pouring into my team and making sure that they're getting what they need from this experience. One of the questions I tell all of my clients, my coaches, my wife, my kids to ask themselves comes in two parts. Am I serving you, and are you serving me? And that doesn't make the relationship transactional by any means. But just even in this exchange on this podcast, Zach, am I serving you? Zach, are you serving me? And the goal is to make sure that the answer to both those questions is yes. And if the answer to either of those questions is no, well, then there's work to be done. There are agreements that can be made to make the shift. And if both answers are no, well, then we've reached an impasse. It's time for us to go our separate ways. The writing's on the wall. Everything's okay. Bygones are bygones, and everything's okay, and we can part ways. It's when we try to simply exist in dishonest harmony, walk on eggshells around each other, you know, invite and accept passive aggressive behavior, that resentment is born. And it only takes a very simple incident to create a hurricane in our relationship, and then it all goes to hell in a handbasket, because neither one of us was brave enough to confront the issue, and we had to create a circumstance for the breakup, which is so much wasted time and energy. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? So to answer your question, who do I help? I help leaders find alignment, to find value in their flow, and to pursue it with reckless abandon. Because the momentum you're looking for in your business, the cohesion you're looking for in your relationships, all of that is found with flow. And just because it is easy, because it is fun, it's where your fulfillment is, that that is less a reason to ignore it and more a reason to pour into it. As opposed to what a lot of us do, myself included, is, oh, that's the shit that nobody else wants to do. With the pieces that I have in place right here, right now, it's so limited. It's such a limited view. It's so, like, can't see the forest for the trees perspective. You know, uh, fuck it, I'll do it. And then you just get stuck in it, because it takes you so long, and it's such an energy suck that you couldn't make yourself available enough to delegate or find the resource to take it off your plate or drive it forward. If that person or that infrastructure was sitting right in front of you.
Mhm. Yeah, great answer. And I like how you expand that across context too, because, and again, this is another one that connected with me because it's a question that I've been trying to answer for the longest time. And it was just like reading a book last week where I finally got
Mhm.
clarity on it. And, one of the things I'd learned from a relationship perspective was what is our role in a relationship? I mean, to
Hmm.
me, it's to focus on meeting the other person's needs, right? I mean,
Hmm.
if we're contributing to that person at the highest level, then that's something that you can genuinely and consistently feel really good about.
Hmm.
Now, the dichotomy is like, well, but then, am I, and you're not supposed to feel guilty. You're not supposed to think
Hmm.
about like whether or not they are really doing the same, but you are.
Hmm.
It's not about keeping like checks and balances, so to speak, as much as it is listening to that intuition, having conversations when things feel like out of balance, when whether it's just simple tasks around the house, like are we managing household responsibilities
Hmm.
well? Is our vision of what we want for the future in alignment? Are we growing together? Are we growing apart? And
Yeah.
all these things are so fundamentally important, because the part that I couldn't understand is how do you give without expectation and
Hmm.
then simultaneously maintain awareness of whether or not the other party is putting
Yeah.
as many deposits in as
Yeah.
you are.
Yep.
And so it's not about keeping score as much as
Nope.
it is remaining aware, is what I've received.
Yeah.
And when you realize it's out of balance, you have hard conversations, and the person either
Hmm.
steps up or they don't. And if they
Yeah.
don't, then they're making the decision for you. But then it's
Hmm.
our responsibility,
Yeah.
to your point earlier, to do what's uncomfortable
Hmm.
and determine what's next for that relationship. How is it going to evolve?
100%.
Left, right, sideways, or what?
Yeah,
Indifferent?
I love that so much, and I love the agreements. So if if you're hip to it and you're have any sense of awareness whatsoever, when you I just learned this term a couple of weeks ago. God winks. Are you familiar? Like the hints that the universe gives to you that
Oh, okay. Yeah,
feel
yeah.
more like a sledgehammer than they do a feather. But so when God winks at you, when the universe gives you a clue, you'd be stupid not to indulge it. And what that looks like in the context of relationship is what I like to call relationship mentors. People that you expose yourself to that are obviously in love, have been like, have figured out what success in their relationship looks like for them, right? And I love when I encounter those people because I'm like, I look at myself and I look at my wife and I'm like, I want that for us. How do we do that? And we were out to dinner with a couple of nights ago. First time we got together with them, and they've been together 30 years. And Nicole and I just hit 10 years. I was like, okay, so how do you get from, very simple, like, how do you get from 10 to and make it to 30? And it was so funny. This guy's a jokester. He's a bit of a comedian, very, very dry, like Seinfeld-ish sense of humor. And he was like, well, to get to 30, you got to make it to 20. And I was like, I love that,
True.
And then, but he gave me a really unique answer because the standard operating procedure is you got to compromise, you got to communicate, whatever. And he's like, you you got to embrace. You can never not be silly with each other. If because
Yeah,
that's really your sense of humor. I don't think there's a truer demonstration of who you really are as a person. And
yeah,
if you have to shelter that or hide that or be less of that, you, to make keep the water calm in your relationship, that sucks, dude. That's no
yeah,
fun. Um, and that was it. Is that was his way of saying never stop experiencing joy in your relationship, right? And for Nicole and I, it's we constantly check in with each other, you know. And we have this fundamental belief in our relationship that it's not 50-50 and it never will be. It's 100 and 100. And over the course of we've been together for over a decade. At some point, one of us is carrying more of the load than the other, right? We just made the decision as we move into this next season of our lives that she's going to be mom and she's going to be all in on these kids and our home, and I'm going to carry the boat on the business end of things. And we are super excited for that. Well, now that we've isolated this new 20% for how we're going to operate in our relationship with each other and for each other, what support do you need to facilitate it? Like
yeah.
we have a very deep understanding of our respective love languages. Hers
Mm.
it are acts of service and words of affirmation. Mine's physical touch and quality time, right? So we are giving each other more of that, because the mistake that we often make and have made in our relationship is simply giving love and expressing it in our own love language, because
Oh yeah.
that's what we would want.
Hmm.
Well, if acts of service and words of affirmation don't land for me, and I'm touchy feely, let's hug and snuggle. Like when she doesn't want that, when she's not vibrating at that frequency, I feel rejected. But that's
Hmm.
my fault.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
at the same time, and at a boy, you did a good job. Like that doesn't really move the needle for me necessarily, right? So if that
Hmm.
falls on deaf ears for her, if she's like, if we're not responsible enough for our how we engage each other in this relationship, well then you're setting yourself up for failure. And the paradox is it's all of your own doing, because
Hmm.
you're trying to get this person, this sovereign being, to be more like you, when the whole point
Hmm.
of the relationship is that they're not you. Right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of the reason that you were vibing in the first place, is because they're not your mirror, you know?
Hmm.
And so rather than compromise, dude, I hate that word in the context of relationships, because the way that we use it in uh civilized society is somebody has to lose. Either we
Yeah.
both have to give something up, or one of us has to take less. And I think that's a complete bullshit way to look at your relationships. However, we can totally agree on what's best for us.
Yeah.
And in service of the highest and best version of our relationship, the highest and best version of ourselves, we can always come to agreement in moving towards that, and never feel like you gave something up.
Yeah.
Right. And
That's beautiful.
it's a totally different energy around these tough decisions, these courageous conversations, because we can always come to agreement, right? More readily than we're able to compromise, and then everything turns into a negotiation, and well, if then and da, 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 da. It's like, no, no, no. Where are we going? If one of us is a saver and the other is a spender, but we have our sights set on that house or this existence or whatever, like, it doesn't matter whichever one of those philosophies or whatever's in the middle serves that. That's the decision we're making. That's the agreement. We agreed on that. We don't have to agree on spending our way to get it or saving our way to get it. No, 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 no. We're doing what's necessary to achieve the higher, better thing. And that's totally different than compromising your way to success.
That's a really cool way to look at it. Like, I realized that for me, for the longest time, and I didn't realize, I mean, it took me 40 years to identify this pattern, or better
Mm,
part of anyway. Like, I didn't realize that when I was experiencing issues with my significant other,
hmm
that I wasn't compromising, and again, for lack of a better word, but like, I was so busy defending my position and what I wanted that
Yeah.
wasn't even looking for where's there mutual ground. Like, how do we co-create this experience in a way that feels good to me and feels
hmm
good to you? And maybe it's not, I'm not getting as much as I expected or wanted or desired. And it's not even about compromise as much as it is about how important is this to the other person and what am I doing to facilitate helping to meet their needs? And that's
Yep.
like such a really a powerful way to look at it. And now it's the practice, all change comes with awareness, right? So now I got to get
Yeah.
even better at it.
hmm
And using that example of you and your wife was also really fascinating because it literally, you just spelled out a scenario from a section in a book I'm reading right now. And they were
hmm
talking about interpersonal dynamics between spouses. And they use this exact scenario where there's an agreement, it's a husband and wife.
hmm
They decide they're going to build a family and start having kids. And He's supporting the household, and she's going to stay at home. And 3 to 4 years in, she tries to express to him like, look, I love this. It's been an incredible gift, but I'm missing my career. I'm missing
Mhm.
these first person interactions. And the masculine response tends to be, well, we had an agreement. Like this is what we talked about, and we default to the conversation we had 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, you're right.
But
We
the
did have an
reality,
agreement.
but
We can make a
yeah,
new one.
but exactly. And that's the whole thing that's so funny as he was as they were going through the story, I'm like, shit, I would probably do that. And then
Mm,
the point is, wait a minute, that was 3 or 4 years ago.
yeah.
Like, I'm a different person, you're a different
Hmm.
person. Now you've gone through this experience, you have different
Dude,
thoughts,
the,
feelings,
yeah,
emotions.
I'm gonna tell you, we lived that. My
Yeah.
my wife had a career. She had literally just quit her corporate gig and launched a with exponential growth her event coordination company in the summer of 19. 7 months in, boom, pandemic, event circuit shuts down. What do we do now?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, not knowing whether or not we were going to have a gym at the end of all of this, she
Mhm.
got it. We came into business together. You're right. And we leveraged her 20% against my 20%. Right. So I could do all the people stuff and she could get us really organized. Right.
Mhm.
We've made two big agreements up to this point. She's going to keep working. We're going to start a family. Boom, 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 boom. Oh shit, that's no longer feasible. We're going to get into business together and continue to grow this family. Okay, that's number two. Well, now we're here at this new fork. What do we want that to look like now? And I just simply
Yeah.
asked, what if you were just mom? And I don't mean just mom, but like, what if you leaned into the thing that truly lights you up? And we created an opportunity to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm doing the things that light me up and give me fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
And none
Yeah.
of those things for her involve a fucking job,
Yeah.
right? So she I just remember sitting there and the tears coming down her face and like what why so sad? I think that's awesome. We can do that. And she's like, I didn't think that was in the cards based on a previous agreement,
Mm.
right? So think about all the shit that you're not talking about that is just on autopilot, you know?
Dude.
And it's like if you just ask the question like, "Oh, let's reboot. Let's start from now and keep moving this thing forward." Right? How much what do I want to say? How many of our programs are just outdated that way? Because we treat these agreements as if they're the 10 commandments. They're written in stone. They are forever.
Yeah.
And it's like to your point, if you're not growing, you're dying. But part of that death is because you're using outdated programs.
Hmm.
Even
Yeah.
even with the best of intentions, you're just
Right.
in your own way, you know? So that's what you just talked about is 100% uh those are 3 seasons of my marriage, our marriage, where we've updated the agreement for the season that we're in or the evolution that we're looking for.
Dude, that's so cool. I mean, I love that because, constant never-ending improvement, evolution, growing as a human. But I think this is so powerful because it also expands the cost context. I mean, it's your interpersonal relationships, your business, it's self-reflection, it's everything. And
Mhm.
like things can change. It's allowed
Mhm.
to, but we
Yeah.
have to communicate those wants, needs, thoughts, desires. Sometimes it's just processing.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's actually making a decision. So I mean, that's beautiful insights. Now, as we wrap up today's episode, I've got two questions I
Mhm.
want to get your insights on.
Yeah.
First, you've coached thousands of leaders and high
Mhm.
performers. What's one blind spot that you consistently see that keeps even the most accomplished people from living in true alignment?
Blind spot. It's lack of awareness around a reality where things are not only different but better. And have you reconciled for yourself inside that reality that you may have taken what you've built or are building as far as you can, or even more importantly, as far as you desired?
Mhm.
Because once you answer that question for yourself truly and honestly, it the potential answer is absolutely fucking terrifying because it's radical accountability. It's all your fault. Because once you get to that answer, everything beyond it is chosen. You can't blame it on anybody else. And that's why people avoid that line of questioning, that line of introspection, like the plague. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's
Well,
the
and we
that's the number one blind spot uh I see more often than not in those that I serve.
it's so simple but so powerful too. Like,
Hmm.
and it's interesting because it's one of like I feel like life is one giant dichotomy. Like, you ever
Hmm.
feel that way?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
dichotomy of business, life, health, like
Hmm.
everything. But it's like maintaining. It's that. What was the phrase or the word you gave me last week? Because we agreed I don't like balance, and you
Oh, harmony.
said
Harmony.
harmony. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. I was
Hmm.
like, dude, for some reason I just went totally blank because I wrote it down. I'm like, oh yeah, harmony. This is gold. But
Uh-huh.
when we're looking for that harmony,
Hmm.
and I think actually that word even helps solve what I'm about to present. It's like the grass is greener on the other side.
Hmm.
Maybe
Hmm.
it can be. Where are you now? I mean, the only
Hmm.
way to make that determination is actually take a step back and go, okay, I'm considering this. Is this something that God, the universe, whatever your belief system put in front of me, and it's
Hmm.
time for me to make a new decision? Or is this just driven by some kind of erroneous belief, temptation, conditioning from the past, whatever? But the only way to know is to gain awareness
Hmm.
over what we are feeling,
Yep.
take a step back and analyze
Hmm.
that decision to what's next. That's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Now, one last question as we wrap up. You
Yeah.
said before that progress is always a core value at next level. So
Hmm.
how do you help leaders make progress when they feel stuck, overwhelmed, or
Yeah.
just are out of alignment?
Sure, dude. I'm gonna tell a story. So when I got home from Afghanistan, I had 17 months left on my contract, my 4-year commitment to the active duty Marine Corps. 17 months. And the I was one of the few lieutenants in my cohort, if you will, that was lacking significant command time in garrison here on U.S. soil. I got a lot of command experience on deployment, but I was lacking that here. And one of the uh, elements that was going to get me promoted from captain to major was that command time. So they said, "Oh, we're going to send you from Yuma, which is where you stop for gas on the way to San Diego from Phoenix. We're going to send you to 29 Palms, which is off the beaten path where you stop for gas between Phoenix and LA." Okay. So out in the middle of nowhere, back to back. I just got home from Afghanistan, more of the same. And I was like, man, I don't want to do that. And at the same time, I really want to start this gym. And with that, I started bargaining. I was like, okay, look, I'll sign up for another tour right here, right now, uh, but you got to send me to Pendleton or Miramar, which is Orange County or San Diego. They're like, no. I was like, okay, take me off the West Coast and send me to Beaufort, South Carolina. They're like, no. It's like, okay, send me to jump school. They're like, what the fuck do you need jump school for, Lieutenant? I was like, I don't, but you want to send me to 29 Palms, and I don't want to do that either. And they were like, no. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna go back to school, and I'm gonna start this gym. And they're like, well, have you started the application process? I was like, no. So you're going to not commit and you haven't been accepted to school yet. I was like, no, I haven't. And they're like, and you're going to start a business. I was like, yes, I am. Like, what the fuck do you know about starting a business? I was like, I don't know. I'm figuring it out. They're like, and this, what's funny about that you talk about dichotomy, right?
Yeah.
I'm coming from an environment where, as an air traffic control officer in the Marine Corps, where we do the 12-month FAA air traffic control curriculum in four, and they're worried about my wherewithal to figure out how to start a gym. Like, dude,
Yeah.
you guys have played a very significant role in creating this monster. My naive
Irony.
self-belief is like peaking right now. You know what I mean? And so, with that, to answer your question, when you feel stuck, you just got to take the next easiest step. So, I
Yeah.
committed over the course of that next 17 months to every day do something that moved the needle towards opening what would become the training facility, the headquarters for Next Level Performance Consulting. Okay. Whether that
Mhm.
was sending an email or when they sent me over to the air traffic control tower and we had this utility room that wasn't being used for shit. So I had my Marines take everything out of it. I went over to MWR, they gave me their equipment manifest, and I uh, scaled it down to create a gym, a 24-hour facility over at the air traffic control tower. So our fat body Marines no longer had an excuse because they were working nights and the gym was closed. So everything became an opportunity to move the needle, and and a lot of the vast majority of those days, and I want to really point this out because I think this helps a lot of people. The vast majority of those days felt inconsequential.
Mm.
I did something but nothing happened, right? However, you send enough emails to the program director at Arizona State in the exercise and wellness department, and you just so happen to be in Phoenix to take your GRE because you can't take it on site in Yuma, and you schedule a face-to-face conversation with her immediately after you take the test, which upon taking, you failed miserably. But because you did so well in that interview in the aftermath, she accepted you on site. And that's where fast forward 2 years, you now have your first master's degree, right? It has an accumulating effect. It's a compounding interest that you don't have to, nothing has to happen. And more than likely, nothing will happen most immediately. But when something does happen, it's going to be big. And you have to trust that. So take the
I
next,
love that.
whatever it is where you're feeling stuck, just take the next easiest step.
I love that. The quote comes to mind. It's like most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade.
Hmm.
And I think that illustrates that perfectly. Like, yeah, so what I want to do is just recap some big takeaways I had from you throughout the conversation, which there's a
Yeah,
lot.
man.
So everybody's gonna have to listen to this one twice. But here's a few. Is one, I love that you said seek intentional adversity. It's like play at the edge of your comfort zone because
Hmm.
stress builds resilience. We've got to push ourselves to that outer edge, and that's so important. And then I love what you said about listen to God or the universe. Like, what are they trying to show you
Hmm.
is next? What is the 20% of what that you do that creates 80% of your desired results? And start to focus on those things more and more and more.
Hmm.
And I love the questions that you ask for interpersonal dynamics of, and they're so simple, and there's only two. Am I serving you? And
Hmm.
are you serving me?
Yeah.
And that's so beautiful. And also you talk about finding relationship mentors. It's so simple but profound. It's like model the best, delete the rest. That's the way I always looked at it. Like I want to be around people who I have relationships with. We were just in a mastermind dinner like a few weeks ago,
Hmm.
and I remember one of the first thoughts I had was the host and his wife. I'm
Yep.
like, oh, dude, that's the kind of relationship I want to have. I
Yeah.
love their interpersonal dynamics and playfulness and support, and it was
Hmm.
just adorable. It was
Yeah.
cool. And then lastly, it's what you just said. Take one small step every day toward
Hmm.
the attainment of the goal.
Hmm.
Create that compounding interest. And part of what comes with that, or I think runs in parallel to that, is awareness
Hmm.
illuminates the opportunity to change. So
Yep.
we've got to listen for those God winks, the
Yeah.
messages from the universe, and take that step back and just determine, What is next? Give yourself permission to do that.
Yep.
Mycal, this has been an incredibly energizing conversation. Again, Mycal Anders, a Marine Corps veteran, founder of Next Level Performance Consulting, and a man who's helping redefine what it means to lead with strength, health, and intention. If today's conversation resonated with you, you guys connect with Mycal at coachdurs.com or find him on LinkedIn, Mycal Anders. And it's Mycal, just to make sure you
Hmm.
find the right Mycal Anders, Mycal. If you're looking for him on LinkedIn. Of course, we'll have all those things in the show notes. Nobody has to search for anything at all. Now, if you're a high performer looking to lead at the next level without sacrificing your health, family, or purpose, you're not alone. This is the kind of alignment that creates legacy. This is the Perpetual Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Palmer. Remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. We'll see you next time.